Now, the corruption controversies won't go away for the Andrews Labor government in Victoria. Former Labor Minister Adem Somyurek is pushing for Premier Daniel Andrews to be referred to the state's anti-corruption watchdog over the so-called red shirt scandal. It's been almost 4 years now since the famous front page, this one in the Herald Sun, exposing a rort that saw almost $400,000 of taxpayers' money spent on electorate staff to campaign for Labor at the 2014 election. Victorian Liberal frontbencher Richard Riordan joins me now. Good to talk to you again, Richard. All those MPs we saw listed on the front page of the Herald Sun way back when, they were the ones sort of fingered in this rorting scandal. Do we know whether police actually got to interview all of them in the end?
No, well, what we do know, Chris, and Somyurek's confessed to this, but we knew this all the way along, is the government actively encouraged its members not to cooperate with the police. They didn't get interviewed properly. They didn't cooperate with the Ombudsman. And so that they were unable to coerce them to do it. So unlike an IBAC inquiry that can actually force these people to submit evidence and tell the truth, the police weren't able to. They just refused to answer and refused to cooperate. And this government stood by and allowed that to happen. And then, of course, when we had the famous Ombudsman's report that came out and said the whole thing was an artifice, it was money stolen, it was all misuse of public funds, nothing could be prosecuted because there were no fingers pointed. But we now have fingers being pointed, and pointed very clearly, Chris.
Yeah, well, Adem Somyurek, who's been booted out of the Labor Party, he's been caught up in branch stacking and all sorts of shenanigans. And he's openly admitting some of his political wrongdoing. He's saying he should be investigated along with all these Labor mates, including the now Premier, then Opposition Leader Daniel Andrews.
Well, I think he almost goes further than that, Chris. In his opinion piece in the Herald Sun today, he's pretty much said Daniel Andrews is the master. He's learnt from the master. And he's putting his hand up and he's saying, Victorian public, not only am I guilty of this, not only should I be investigated, but so should 24 of my colleagues. And the biggest one to be investigated is Daniel Andrews himself, who he says, you know, in a calculating and cunning way, knew he was ripping the system off in order to win an election.
Just briefly, Richard, will we get resolution of this? Will there be a proper inquiry soon?
We won't get an inquiry unless the independents in the Victorian Upper House support Somyurek, support the Liberal Party and support others that want transparency and decency in the Victorian Parliament. But unfortunately, we've seen Daniel Andrews work his magic on those independents. If he does that, he will again stop yet another investigation into his behaviour and his alleged corruption.
Thanks for joining us, Richard. Richard Riordan there, who's opposition frontbencher in Victoria. It's just an astonishing situation. Someone's got to look at this properly, but what the Labor Party's done there is basically just stymie any proper accountability. All we want in politics is accountability in the end and transparency.